along or to contribute. Um, Also, distributed through here is the governor's personal handle. So if you want to send him a message directly, you can. That'll also be in Mr. Tim's presentation. If you're moved by what you hear tonight and want to do something about it, we've provided everyone this packet. So even if you're not on Twitter, there are phone numbers of your legislators, email addresses. They've heard this already. You know, it's not a surprise, but I think our force of will, the more people that hear about it, the more likely they are to try and do something about it. And lastly, before we start, we're not alone in this. Similar rallies like this have happened in Albany, in Syracuse, in Auburn. There's one planned for Buffalo next week, and Camillus. So we're not alone, and we really want to end the GEA. So please consider sending a message to your legislators. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bob Mihevik, and I'm a board member with the Herkimer Central School District. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the 10 school districts which comprise the Valley Consortium of Schools for tonight's rally, Fight for Our Valley Schools. In a couple minutes, I'll introduce Dr. Rick Timms, the Executive Director of the statewide School Finance Consortium, who will explain in some detail the current status of the New York State school funding, a system which we believed is inequitable, unfair to our students and to our communities. Following Dr. Timms' presentation, we'll be hearing from Herkimer High School Student Council President Dan Amick, who will speak to the effects of long-term underfunding of our schools from a student's perspective. First, I'd like to offer special thanks to Herkimer College and Acting President Nick Lano for the use of the facility. We appreciate our continued great relationship with our community college and applaud them for the fine education they provide for our region's students. I'd also like to thank our district superintendent, Mark Vivacqua, who along with his staff was responsible for putting tonight's rally together. Mark's been an outspoken advocate for equitable funding for our upstate schools, and I'm sure we all enjoy his editorial comments in the local papers. Tonight's rally is primarily about state aid, but school funding is not the only issue that prevents our low-wealth schools from providing the quality education that our students deserve. Expenses are also too high due to crushing mandates that districts need to comply with. An integral part of the tax cap proposal was that, in addition to the 2% tax cap, the state would provide meaningful mandate relief. The tax cap happened, but the mandate relief never materialized. Just as an example, in Herkimer, our budget line item for insurance benefits this year shows an increase of $219,000. Under the tax cap, we can only raise $140,000 in total revenue. Just that one budget line item puts us $79,000 in deficit. Over 50 mandate reforms were identified by the Governor's Mandate Relief Council, but only 3 were implemented that directly related to schools, none of which afforded significant budget relief. Major mandates like APPR and the related testing, the high cost of the Common Core, implementation, and the Wicks Law remain as burdens for our high-needs districts. But to get to the issue at hand, Dr. Rick Timms is a frequent presenter at workshops and conferences and has written numerous articles and professionally presented statewide on national topics of educational development, the use of data to improve instruction, educational finance, leadership and governance. Dr. Timms is the president and CEO of R.G. Timms Advisory Group, Inc., consultant to Bernard P. Donegan, Inc., as an educational financial expert, and the executive director of the statewide School Finance Consortium. The statewide School Finance Consortium is an organization of more than 400 New York public school districts, including the 10 school districts represented here tonight, whose mission is to bring equity to the distribution of New York State educational aid. So it is my pleasure to introduce at this time Dr. Rick Timms.
Thank you, Ron. You're welcome. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to take you through a little exercise that we would normally do in a social studies class in high school, kind of bring everybody up to speed on what the state aid situation is. So kind of bear with me. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of transport everybody to being a senior in economics or U.S. history and government in high school, and we're going to kind of take a look at what's happening to the schools in the valley. And I think what you're going to see is something very disturbing, because we are running out of time and we're running out of options. I think many people think everything's just fine, but I think you'll find out something different. So bear with me. I'm going to carry you right through everything, and I think we've got enough here to keep us going for a long time. This is a graph that every senior in high school ought to be able to interpret. You're probably looking at it now saying, I can't interpret it. Well, you need a little help, so here goes. So we're going to start with the title, The Impact of State Aid Cuts 2013-14, CWR to Gap Elimination Adjustment as a percent of 12-13 budget. So what the heck is all that? Well, it's really pretty easy. We're going to look at the impact of state aid cuts. You see, what actually people think is happening is the state keeps sending us state aid. Well, in a way they do. They're supposed to send us a certain amount, but they keep cutting the amount that they send us. And therefore, what they're actually doing is cutting the revenue to your school district. So let's just take a look at it. The first initials are CWR. They're really described down here at the bottom, the combined wealth ratio, property and income. You see, here's what happens. When you fill out your New York State income tax, which you're either doing this month or next month or pretty soon, if you haven't already done it, there's a little box on that form that says school district code. And you put down your school district code. And once you put that number in there, the state now knows not only how much you make, but how much all the people in your school district make. They also know how much the income is in every school district in the state of New York, and they know the sum total of all the income in the state of New York. So what they want to do is they want to do a ratio. What they really want to do is say, what's the income of your school district compared to the income of the state average? So let's just say the average income in your school district was $25,000 a year, and the state average income was $100,000 a year. You would be 1/4 of the state average as a decimal 0.25. So what they do is one of the wealth measures, combined wealth ratios, one of the wealth measures is income, and the ratio to the state average, yours would be 1/4, 0.25. They do the exact same thing with the property wealth within every one of your communities. When your school district taxes go in and you pay those taxes, that data goes into the New York State government, and what they can actually do is they can figure out total property value wealth of every school district in the state of New York. They can also find out what the total property wealth is of the state of New York. And they can compare your property wealth in your school district to the property wealth on average in the state of New York. So if the average parcel property in your school district was worth $50,000 and the state average was $100,000, you would be half the state average, or decimal 0.5. So the term combined wealth ratio is what they actually do is they take each of the wealth measures, cut them in half, and add them together. They combine them. They combine the wealth ratios. So what actually happens is if you are average, in other words, if you had $100,000 worth of property at $100,000 worth of state property,